Mr. Eric Schmidt, Chairperson of Google, I'd like to welcome and congratulate you for your first visit in Israel, which I believe will be a very successful and fruitful one. I was very happy that I had the chance to speak with you and to see just how connected you are to the vision in the context of using advanced technologies for purposes of teaching and learning. And I hope you enjoy your visit and have a successful one. Mr. Doron Avni, Head of Policy and Government Relations in Google Israel, to my colleague, Ms. M.K. Ronit Tirosh, Chairperson of Science and Technology Committee of the Knesset. The title of this event is The Internet New Agenda Setting, ? And I think that the question mark at the end of the sentence is superfluous. I would like to share with you some thoughts regarding the changes. The very dramatic, very quick changes that were introduced by the Internet into the public arena as well as into the educational arena. And this, in reality, is developing much more quickly than the paradigms that need to describe how it develops. A lot has been said about how the Internet creates democracy or democratization of the political expression. Every person has a keyboard, and of course this truly weakens the unique power in the public arena, both of public figures but also the traditional mediators of information, that is the journalists, the commentators, the experts. And if we think about it a little bit longer, we will recognize a potential, at least potential challenging of the traditional political order of the democratic world, which is a political order of governance through representatives. This idea, if I can find one central backing from political science, is very well established in John Stuart Mill's book, Governance of Representatives, that just celebrated its 150th anniversary. And Mill's first conclusion, when he discusses the ideal form of governance, he determines that it awards sovereignty, that is, the supervising governance ultimately by the entire group or congregation, the rule of the people. And the conclusion that follows suit immediately, because probably all the citizens will personally participate in public affairs, then the ideal type of the perfect government by John Stuart Mill is that of representatives. Why? Because the first question he deals with is how to establish a daily mechanism of decisions. We all know that we can go to elections that cost several hundreds of millions and then send delegates to reach decisions, but in the past it wasn't possible to establish a quick and immediate and cheap, efficient and effective mechanism that would include the entire body of constituents. But that was true in the past. Today, in the Internet era, it is possible. Every law, with not too big a cost, at least in theoretical terms, theoretically speaking, every law can be decided through a referendum on the Internet. Every topic, every subject that a certain party raises can be decided by all the members of the party through the Internet, and we will know the results quite quickly, and it won't cost that much money. So much so that I read about a political party in Australia, a kind of Internet party that is based on Internet voting, and it has already participated for the first time in the elections for the Senate in Australia in 2010. Now, the principle, the not so ideological principle of this party determines that the elected members have to choose according to the selection or the voting of the virtual voters, and they receive a briefing of every bill and they vote online. So the representative actually hardly has any power, any decisive power or judgmental power, and in this respect it is a closer realization of the classic Athenian democracy. By the way, so far, at least according to this party's website, it didn't do so well in the 2010 elections, but it is preparing for the 2013 elections and will probably follow up on the results. So actually, this is a complete replacement of this idea of a government of representatives. And in contrast to the past, the tool that makes it possible already exists. And of course, Mill had some additional reasons that explain why you do need a governance of representatives. And I think that these reasons are still valid today. He doubted, for example, and I don't think it was mistaken, the ability of the entire collective to reach intelligent decisions without expertise and professionalism. And I quote him, "You need to weigh and consider all the contradicting opinions, and for that you need some kind of a discretionary or weighting body, and this requires knowledge of the material, and the management of the state and the legislation of laws should be in the qualified hands of several few who are especially trained and experienced." And I think this still holds true today, even if some people might say that this is not classically realized in the democracies that he or she knows. But I also wish to argue that over time, internet is a tool and a mechanism that will create pressure to transfer the decisions from a democracy through representatives or experts to direct democracy. And I mentioned earlier that Australian party, but to a certain extent, if we correctly identify the power of the internet as an organizing one in the protest of the recent summer and similar protests that took place all over the world, more or less at around about the same time. Perhaps it is no coincidence that we've witnessed a phenomenon in which the call of the demonstrators was the people request or the people demand, and it goes along with a very explicit statement. We, the demonstrators, are the ones who represent the people and speak on their behalf and not the elected officials. Today, quite easily and quite quickly, almost on every topic, one can write internet petitions of imaginary scale of signatures, and that places a challenge. The political systems need to face this challenge on the backdrop of various feelings of alienation that already exist anyhow, that the voted electives do not truly represent the interests of the general population. And there are a lot of locuses through which we can see that same democratization I talked about of internet activity. For example, today you count Facebook statuses, also talkbacks are segmentized, how many are for one position and how many for the contradictory one, and there's this thought that there's also an attempt to influence these things, but I think that's hardly any realm in our political lives today that is not dramatically affected by the internet. And by the way, I think, and if earlier I mentioned a component that could raise some question marks and even bother people, there are also a lot of positive changes in the fundraising patterns, and that was quite evident in the previous preliminary elections for Obama, and this establishes democratization of the contribution and donation system, and this weakens the power of the tycoons' political participation. We saw all the voices voice contractors in the parties become less powerful, and I think this also had a certain weight in the elections of the member of the chairperson of the Labour Party in Israel, Sheli Yachimovich. Young people who will better know how to operate this world, recruiting volunteers through the internet. So the political world is being exposed to something very dynamic with very quick changes that forces its players to constantly keep up to date as well. And also a very big influence that I touched upon earlier is the influence over traditional media that was weakened twice. First of all, it was weakened when it comes to the public. Everybody mediates reality. Anyone can mediate reality. Anyone can be a commentator. And in this situation, the weight, let's say if we take the column page or the opinion page in a newspaper, it has really diminished and decreased. It is not similar at all to the status it had in. If the status of newspaper has gone down, then the opinion section has gone even dramatically further down. People today can express their opinions in unmediated forms and often with larger readerships than the printed press has. But that's one aspect. Another aspect is with respect to the political system on its various levels. The media has weakened as a result of this new era, the internet era. It had a certain power over the politicians, the media. A politician whom they wrote about something not so nice, he could ask them to correct that. He could have published a response. And if he was really right, he could demand that they post an apology, and that usually didn't help. But today, a politician can simply respond through the internet. He doesn't need to ask them for anything, and he often reaches a much greater readership with much more follow-ups than what the journalist who wrote about it has. So, therefore, traditional media is being eroded from various directions as a result of this reality. The internet, of course, has influences in the telecommunications era, dramatic influences when it comes to education, learning, teaching, and there are certain principles that are quite clear. First of all, there is a lot of available supply of information, which is unmediated. And this enables every consumer to approach it in an unmediated way, and then that consumer doesn't need the teacher for that. Number two, there must be a change in the ways of teaching that takes into consideration the world in which the students grow up today. And this is a good place to thank Google for our joint activity with respect to teachers training, for using advanced technologies for teaching purposes. The new generation grows up in a world of stimuli. The lack of advanced technology, its absence from the classroom is impossible. It is no longer an option. In case you haven't noticed it yet, that means that you're lagging behind. It's too late. The entire teaching profession needs to change. The use of advanced technologies is required for the professional status of teachers as well. Teaching through a blackboard and chalk only is not relevant, and it doesn't mean that all the traditional forms of teaching are long gone. There are various ways for illustration and demonstration. There are certain ways to receive attention. I visited LIDA today, where we started our telecommunications program. The impact of these things is dramatic. The ability to gain the attention, especially the attention of the weaker students, is very different when you use advanced technologies. So there's huge potential here to improve the quality of teaching, and there's a lot of room for independence for every teacher to locate information, to develop it. It's a huge world. It also shifts, or is supposed to shift, the teachers and educators from the direction of basically giving information purely into directions that focus on various skills of thinking and learning, also giving skills. And that, and also through the return of values of education, the return of the teacher as educator, I think that in the years to come, these things will become much more significant than it seems. Today, through the internet, teaching does not depend on place. You can reach the very best teachers for math or English through the internet. And this thing hasn't been completely instilled into the educational systems, but it has huge potential if we believe what's written in the McKinsey report in 2007, I think, and I do believe what's written there, that the most important component or variable for the success of an educational system is the quality of teachers. If you believe in that, then there's huge potential for tremendous changes without too heavy of a financial investment. And today we are indeed working through the educational TV and its developing website, which is rather new, only 3 years old, to create such a bank of computerized classes that will be available for students. And the significance of this is that the world of education cannot be detached from technological developments. The need to be up to date is critical, and it's much more important to understand the implications that advanced technologies have in processes of learning and teaching than counting the number of computers or focusing on non-sophisticated ways of assessing this component of telecommunication in schools now. I do hope that this discussion that was held here will contribute to the deepening of insights on these matters. Just like Doron said, I need to leave at this point, and I do promise to be updated on each of these legs, and both are relevant for me and everything that will be said by the speakers in the panel and also later on. Thank you very much for listening.